Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susie Casero. I'm General Counsel of the Producers Guild of America. Really nice to see everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce all of you to CBC and BET Plus Break New Ground. It's going to be a fabulous session. First, I would like to say thank you to our friends at CBC Radio Canada for sponsorship of this panel. As a courtesy, please do silence your cell phones and keep your masks on. Also, at the end, when we open it up to question, please remember, no pitching, as tempted as you may be. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you all Catherine Tate, President and CEO of CBC Radio Canada. Catherine.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to correct your pronunciation, CBC Radio Canada. Thank you all for being here. As the President and CEO of CBC, Canada's public broadcaster, I want to tell you about the incredibly important role we play in our television industry. We're the single largest commissioner of original content in Canada. In fact, we commission as much original Canadian programming as all the private networks in Canada combined. So Canadians have a reflex, and I'm sure you've heard it, to interject, he's Canadian or she's Canadian, whenever discussing TV or movies with Americans. If you've ever been around a Canadian and mentioned Denis Villeneuve, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Elliot Page, or Sandra Oh, or any of the other many talented people from north of the 49th parallel, you've probably experienced this. But what you may not know is that it is Canada's public broadcaster that is the driving force behind some of the world's biggest stars and shows. We are the creative engine producing shows, global hits like Schitt's Creek, Kim's Convenience, supporting and launching stars like Sarah Polley and Simu Liu. Our remarkable comedy legacy brought SCTV and Kids in the Hall to the world. So we're a network that doesn't shy away from risk. In fact, we celebrate it. These shows exist because of Canada, a country that values diversity, inclusion, and tolerance, a country that provides financial support to Canadian-originated shows, and yes, a country that has a national public broadcaster with a mandate to find, invest in, and promote our stories. And given the insanely competitive environment of entertainment programming today and the far deeper pockets of Netflix, Disney, and others, international partnerships are key to ensuring that Canadian stories can be told on the scale and scope that they deserve. They allow us to collaborate to compete. And CBC is an attractive partner for co-productions because of our creative talent, our skilled crews, and because of many financing advantages that our producers can bring to the table. One of our most recent co-productions is Sort of, a series about a gender-fluid Pakistani millennial produced in partnership with HBO Max. This series launched to incredible acclaim last fall, swept our Canadian Screen Awards, and won a Peabody earlier this week. As it happens, producer extraordinaire, I thought she would be here so I could point to her, but you'll meet her in a second, Jennifer Kawaja produced Sort of, as well as The Porter, the show we're here to discuss today. The Porter is a truly remarkable series presented by CBC and BET Plus. This period drama shows the struggles and ambitions of the railway workers from both Canada and the United States who gave birth to the world's first black labor union in the 1920s. From the jazz age cabarets of Montreal to the back alleys of Prohibition-era Chicago, the series has won critical acclaim. Normally I would have a podium. And it reviews the richness and diversity of the black train porters and their community. This show is the biggest black-led TV series in Canada's history, and it was only made possible by our partnership with BET Plus. And it's really a testament to how the right partnership can make a project go that much further. I'm delighted that Tanya Williams is here moderating this panel today because she is such a force in the creative community in Canada. She founded and for 22 years has been the executive director of Real World, addressing the exclusion of Black, Indigenous, and racialized people in Canada's screen industries. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Devin Griffin, Executive Vice President and General Manager of BET+, who was instrumental in the launch of BET's streaming service in 2019. Devin, thank you for your partnership on this groundbreaking series.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Well, I just wanted to make a couple of remarks and try to adhere to the number one rule in speech making when you're between the start and the main dish, which is be brief, brother, be brief. So I'm going to follow those 5 Bs. I just want to tell a little bit about how the story, how this show came to be, because it is very unusual for a network like BET and a streaming service that we just recently launched about 2.5 years ago to collaborate with a massive force like the CBC. The origins of the series actually weren't, at least for me in Canada. There's a good British friend of mine named Jonathan Ford who called me, and he had recently started a new company and said, hey, I've started this company, I'm making shows. I've got this Canadian show, which is a period drama about sort of pre-civil rights era, and as someone who's been around streaming for a while, those are all kind of the opposite of what you're looking for in a show. You know, period is tricky, it's very expensive and hard to execute well, and people generally don't care about things that, I shouldn't say people, our audience hasn't shown that they care about historical topics. Well, fast forward, we got into the story, into the scripts, and they were just absolutely undeniable. The stories that are told still resonate today in a way that BET, frankly, hasn't done a lot of, which is why we were so drawn to this opportunity. And the fact that the team, the creative team, so I have to give a big shout to Jennifer, Charles, Arnold, Annmarie, Marsha, all of the creators who had this vision of telling a story that really needed to be rooted in the reality of what it meant to be a Black American as well as a Canadian Black citizen. And that was something that I think that our collaboration was really able to bring into this story. And then, you know, on top of that, for BET, the opportunity for us to tell global stories. We care a lot about not just the African American experience, but about the breadth and the richness, the diversity within the diversity of the Black experience, which means talking about the ways in which Blackness manifests, the beauty of Blackness manifests our culture and our stories. So to be able to have a story that literally connects from Canada down into the US and back again, in order to have, you know, talent, you know, such as we do in front of the camera that are from both sides of the water and both sides of the border, again, just made this an opportunity that for BET, which has traditionally been very US focused, very, you know, enmeshed in what it means to be a Black American, it was just an opportunity for us to do something more, which is really what BET Plus is about. BET Plus is about trying to represent the full breadth, the full spectrum of the Black experience. So we've had great opportunities to, as many know, you know, music videos, or as I was saying at lunch the other day, you know, booty shaking videos is sort of where the business started, but it has expanded over that, in that we've been able to tell great stories steeped in music culture, but then now to expand into things that are historical, things that are global, are really about what BET Plus is adding to the portfolio. So really with that, I just wanted to share that we're just really grateful to be partnered with the CBC, partnered with this amazing creative team to tell new stories that stretch us beyond what we have done for the first 40 years of our existence into what looks to be a new frontier for us. So we're really excited about the slate that we have, you know, coming out currently this summer, making all kinds of interesting projects with new producers that come from different angles and different reaches, and this is really just sort of the start for us. And so, as Catherine had alluded to, the idea that critics have really embraced the series, the fact that we are collaborating together to really put it in front of the awards communities, it's really a first for us as a 2.5-year-old service. It's something that, again, we really embrace and that we're, you know, really excited to be a part of. So that's all I really wanted to share, just to say that our partnership is very important to us, and I think that you're going to have a wonderful time hearing from this really talented panel of artists, creators, and innovators that have brought the Porter to life. So with that, I will pass it over to Tanya Williams.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine and Devin. Excited to be here, and it's a fantastic show. I hope you've all had a chance to see it. Okay, so this is the creative team we're going to bring out now behind the show, and we're going to start with Jennifer Kawaja. Come on out, Jennifer. Jennifer is the president of scripted content at Sphere Media Company and executive producer of The Porter. Her other projects include the Peabody-winning series, Sort of, which Catherine just spoke about, so congratulations on that. And the award-winning drama, Cardinal. I love that show, just to name a few. And Arnold Pinnock. Come on out, Arnold. Arnold is the originator, creator, and executive producer of The Porter, born in the UK. Woohoo, yeah. Arnold's acting career began at Toronto's Second City, and his work in film and television has spanned almost 3 decades, with over 120 credits to his name, including Exit Wounds, Altered Carbon, and The Parker Andersons. Isn't it great how great we are on paper? Oh, I love it. Annmarie Morais. Annmarie Morais is the co-showrunner, writer, and executive producer of The Porter. Her first feature film, How She Moved, was in 2007, was a 2007 Sundance selection, and her work in television is equally noteworthy, including the BET series American Soul, about Don Cornelius and the Soul Train Empire. And we now have Aml. Come on out, Aml. He stars as train porter Junior Massey and is also an executive producer on the series. Hailing from North London, Aml in the house. Aml can also be seen in the acclaimed series I May Destroy You. Excellent. Where he plays a good guy and recently made his directorial debut with Boxing Day, the UK's first holiday romantic comedy featuring an all-black cast. Welcome all of you. Arnold, I'm going to start with you, because I know this journey was a 13-year journey for you. Tell us how this journey began. I mean, what inspired The Porter for you, and how did you end up bringing it to Jennifer?
Well, you said I'm originally from England, 2 London guys here, and I'm from Birmingham, so I'm a little, outnumbered here. But when we came to Canada, my parents were originally from Jamaica. We come from a long line of storytellers. So it was really important for me that when we came here, I was looking for stories about people that looked like us, that had experiences like us. And one of the common denominators that kept on coming up as I was traveling through Canada was porters. And I didn't know anything about porters other than the black and white pictures, the movies that we'd seen back in the day. It's so funny that we were in the Shirley Temple room, because back there I was remembering stuff like that. But what really took me to the next level was when I found out what these men and women did that came from places from the southern states, as well as Canada, the Caribbean. And when they came to this country, be it south or north of the border, and bonded together to form the first black union, it blew my mind, because I was like, why didn't I know this? And not only did they bond together to form the first black union, but they were the seedlings of the civil rights movement. And their stories were rich and beautiful, and it really empowered me. So along with my writing partner, Bruce Ramsey, we decided to base this story in Montreal. And we first came to Jennifer way back when it was a movie, and we realized that in doing it like a movie, it wasn't going to tell the real story, the big story. And we realized it needed to become a television series. And I grew up at the CBC, And so I knew that that was the place that we had to go. Their mandate, their reach, their principles. So when we brought it to them, right after that, I found myself having a conversation with Jennifer again. We just met by chance. And she said, "What were you working on?" And I said, "I'm working on a show called The Porter." And she was like, let me see it again. And she was like, "That's it." And then when I found someone who was just as passionate as I was about the subject matter, it was just great to get the partnership between Sienna, myself, and of course CBC. And then, you know, when someone has that same passion as you about something like this, you know you're in the right hands. So we were blessed to find Jennifer. So that's how it rolled.
I love that. And Jennifer, how did you and Sphere Media first meet Arnold and come on board to develop the project? I mean, what drew you to it and what was the process?
Well, I guess Arnold and I met on a show that we were doing sort of 10 years before we started to do this, and talked a lot about what stories were being told and what stories weren't being told. And I'm also an immigrant to Canada from the Caribbean, and spent my life in the Caribbean hearing, you know, sort of British news about myself and British stories, and then came to Canada and felt like I wasn't seeing stories that were around me that I connected with. And so that was sort of the context. And when Arnold told me the story, I was really taken with it, because I believe strongly that if we don't know our history, our full history, that we can't have a full society, we can't have a full democracy, we can't have fully participating citizenry. So that's where I come from. And when Arnold said, when he was making a movie out of it, I was like, man, this is a lot of stuff to go into a movie. But when he came back and said he was doing it as a series, I just got really excited. And so that was really it. We started working on it, and took a long time. And I love that it crossed these borders between America and Canada, because that history is so connected and so much a part of both countries. So yeah, we just started working on it bit by bit.
You know, what's nice with that answer is you and Arlen knew each other for about 10 years, and I think we often forget that it's not just going up and pitching something to someone who's a stranger. You build relationships with people in the industry, and you finally end up working with them in some way, but you tend to know them. So that's good. I didn't know you were from the Caribbean. Which island?
St. Kitts.
St. Kitts. That's
St.
where
Kitts.
That's where my dad retired and was. Okay.
Oh my God. We have to talk.
Whatever.
Well, Annmarie and I know each other as well, because we did How She Moved together like 10 years or 12 years before as well. So.
That's true. So for you also, Jennifer, Canada has a really unique production industry, which I'm sure everyone here would love to know about. For the benefit of American producers here, tell us a little about how the funding model works in Canada and the opportunities for co-productions like The Porter, or sort of.
Well, there's sort of three main ways that you can work with Canada from the US or from anywhere else. But the first approach, they all have variations within them, but the first approach is the approach we took with Porter, which is a 10 out of 10 CanCon production, where it originates in Canada, and most of the creative behind the scenes talent are Canadian. And then you enter into a US partnership, as we did with BET Plus. But usually the amount of money coming from Canada is like 70% of the budget, and then the amount of money coming from the US or elsewhere is about 30% of the budget. In that model, all of the creative behind the scenes talent, like I said, has to be Canadian. The other model is a 6 out of 10 sort of co-venture model, where the project can originate from either place, but the writer or director of each episode of television has to be Canadian, and there are a couple of other rules, obviously, always. And often that model, you'd find 70% of the money coming from the US or elsewhere, and 30% coming from Canada. I'm just giving very approximate numbers. And then the third way is within the context of a treaty co-production, where, and I've done this before as well, although that's not what we did on Porter and Sort of, which were, sort of very much generated from Canada creatively, but you do a co-production with a country like South Africa or England or France, Germany, wherever Canada has a treaty agreement with, whichever country, and then the US comes in and adds to it and participates as, there are various ways to set it up, but the project could come from the US. It just has to have some Canadian content or some Canadian creatives usually, but, and there's a whole point structure, but those are the basic three approaches. But Porter and Sort of were supported, projects that were supported in development by CBC, which, as you all know here, without that push to get something into development, it becomes really hard to finance it internationally and sell it. So we were very, very lucky for that partnership. And then, of course, again, lucky with BET Plus, where we had some choices and loved, the whole team met Devin, and, it felt so right to go with Devin and BET Plus. So that's how we began our partnership.
I love that. It's just as easy as that. But, for all of you out there who might want more information, there is telefilm.ca, which is a great website to learn more about how Canada and co-production works and the countries that we have co-production treaties with, which is not the US, but it's just great for information for you guys. So tell us then, I love this question, needs to be expanded what you asked, but answered already, but how did BET Plus come on board after CBC greenlit the project in Canada? I know the process was that you had a meeting with him, but what are the nuts and bolts of how it actually works? Because the series starts it airs in Canada first, and it's airing here later. Is that it just started?
Yeah. So once CBC greenlit the series and we had some scripts, I went to a UK sales agent that I work with often, by the name of Jonathan Ford, who runs a company called Abacus, and asked him to help us go to the US to find a partner. And we went to several places. One of them was BET Plus. And so we had several meetings with BET Plus, some just with me, some with the whole creative team. And we just chose BET Plus over other possibilities. And so once you do that, then you start trying to, you have a finance plan, and you know what you're missing when you go into the US market, just like you would if you came to Canada, know what you were missing in your finance plan. So we knew sort of what we were trying to fill. And so between BET Plus and an international advance, we put the final pieces together, and then we worked creatively with both the CBC team and the BET Plus team for the whole duration of the show, developing all the rest of the scripts in the editing phase. So we had, this amazing team of people who love the project and who were giving us notes along the way, and to the bitter end.
And were they involved in the casting as well?
Yes. I don't know if somebody else wants to talk.
It will. There's an order.
Okay.
I'm following the script.
Yeah, both broadcasters were completely involved in the casting, as were the three of us and the rest of the creative team who aren't here. So Marcia Green, who is the co-showrunner with Annmarie, and Charles Officer and R.T. Thorne, both directors and EPs on the project. And it was a really challenging process because in this configuration, most of the cast had to be Canadian. So it took us months to get the cast that we had and that we found, and for CBC and BET Plus and ourselves to be happy. And yeah, it was kind of an amazing process too, because there's so many incredibly talented actors out there to choose from. But because it's such an ensemble, it's hard to cast. You know, you're constantly kind of looking at 6 or 10 actors' faces all at once. So, and there was lots of conversation and disagreement and agreement and you know, stuff along the way.
Got the right team, though.
Yeah.
You got the right actors.
Exactly. And speaking of fantastic actors, Aml, what attracted you to this project?
What was it, afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Do you know what's interesting? I didn't want to do any show or anything like that. I was in the midst of editing Boxing Day, which is my film, and I was literally in London, and I got sent this, and I was just like, I'm editing my movie, leave me alone, you know? And the agents are like, you need to make some money now, but I'm like, I'm editing my movie, leave me alone. And they said, give it a read, because they know that I'm totally fascinated with the 20s and who we have been through our history as black people, and reshaping that and redefining that in a very truthful way, unearthing history that has been buried, that goes beyond slavery, and also after it showing our agency and showing how me and Mel today and other black people stand on the shoulders of very revolutionary people that predate civil rights. So, I'm looking at the script thinking about all that sort of stuff, and I'm like, all right, cool, let me look at it. And then I see the character Junior Massey, who's this, 1920s guy that's just come back from the war. He's a hustler, he's a bootlegger, he's a rebel. He likes to dance, he likes to smoke, loves his wife. I was like, yo, this might be a bit of me. Do you know what I mean? And so I read it, and I just got totally fascinated by the world. And I was talking the other day, actually, one of these interviews. Do you remember the film North by Northwest, right? Great film, Cary Grant, love it. There's one black guy in it, and he comes in, and he's like, hey, Mr. Cary Grant, and he does, and he's a porter, right? And then you come away from that guy after he's like a 5, 6, 7 comedy act, and you're like, all right, well, that was a lot of what a lot of black people had to go through, but who is that guy? And how much was he hiding his smiles and cries in front of people? And that's what the porter brings. The porter gives you an inside track into who these men and women were at this particular time, and how they articulated themselves very differently. You have Zeke on one hand, who's revolutionary in his own way, trying to build a world and a structure and an infrastructure that we can all go forward in. And there's Junior's like, I want my money. You know what I mean? I want my damn money. And so, I love that juxtaposition of characters. And so that's why I got involved in it, and that's why I was like, want to be a part of it. And it was a really interesting journey. It was a very particularly interesting journey, me coming from just directing, producing, starring and writing my own film, and then going back into the seat of an actor. And luckily for me, the team was collaborative. I don't think they thought I was going to be as enthusiastic as an EP as I was. I was very enthusiastic, much to the chagrin sometimes. But truly, I think we found a rhythm of a story that we're all very passionate about. I've worked on a lot of shows throughout my career, and you can't say that the passion is there in the way that it is in this. And I think it's because everybody wants to leap forward a story from Canada that is every black person's story through the diaspora, because we all just went to different places or got dropped off in different places. And so that's why I'm really passionate about The Porter, and it's a show that I hope continues and grows, and also finds an audience that will invest themselves in it, because it's a beautiful show.
Now, had you met any of the people here before? Did you know them?
No.
Had you been to Canada before?
Sorry again?
Had you been to Canada?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's how you make your money. You go to Vancouver, you do like your TV series, and yeah. So I'd been to Vancouver. I actually been to Vancouver. I did a film over there, and I have family from Toronto, So like literally, my family either went to New York, London, or Toronto. I'm Jamaican and Vincentian, so we got dropped off, or we went to different places, shall I say. So I kind of knew it, and I got to know. Has anyone been to Winnipeg? You should go to Winnipeg.
In February.
It's a different. It's a very cold Canadian experience, but yeah.
No, that's great. Annmarie, I've not forgotten you.
I'm enjoying hearing all
Yeah,
this.
it's like, whoa, I got to
It's
speak.
very lovely.
While inspired by history, you and the team play with timelines and locations, and when it comes to many of the historical events. So tell us more about that, the challenges of producing and shooting a period drama.
Yeah, there are decisions, obviously, that we make in the room collectively, but Marcia and I, my co-showrunner, and I had to sort of sit down and sort of decide what are the stories that we really thought were essential from the history. And sometimes when we kind of tell the whole story, we're spanning decades of time when we talk about how this union came to life, really, and we don't. Well, God willing, knock on something, maybe we do have 10 years to tell a story, I don't know. But in collapsing the history, we have to think, okay, what is essential in sort of moving this story forward season to season when it comes to historical characters and figures. You know, we obviously weren't in the room when many of these conversations were happening, so we had to sort of look into who is this character, who is Marcus Garvey, who is A. Philip Randolph, and what did they espouse, and what written material is there about them, and what kind of things do we know that historically is documented. So we tried to be true to the character, even if we were inventing the moment. So there's ways that we do have to play, and there's some things that we absolutely didn't want to diverge from in terms of historical accuracy. But yeah, there are choices you have to make every day.
Now, you really, the series portrays the harsh realities of racism, but also the resilience and the joy of these characters, the full spectrum of the Black experience. So how did you and the creative team, but I'll ask you, Annmarie, how did you approach that duality?
I think what I really appreciated about our earlier conversations with our BET partnership was that, you know, one of the things that was expressed is that they didn't want to feel, we were dealing with so much in the actual space of time and historically as Black people in this nation. There were things going on in the world that made us feel like we were underwater, that made us feel like we were sort of just fighting for space in the world. And so we didn't want to create a show where we deal with that 24/7 of our lives, and then I have to turn on the TV and feel like I'm struggling. And in many ways, we honor that phrase that we couldn't breathe. So we knew that a part of our experience, all of our life, is not about the suffering. In the suffering, in the struggle, marriages still happen, dances still happened, love and community and thriving, and that resistance is all part of it. And so we wanted to speak to the whole spectrum of our lives that, you know, we experience on a daily basis. It's really important for us.
Love that. Well, you guys, you do a fantastic job, all of you, on it. And I think now we're opening it up to questions. I hope that's what that thumbs up meant. Rolling in, yes.
I just wanted to ask what your trajectory was to become a showrunner, and how that journey worked out for you, and what were the jobs you took, the ones you wanted and the ones you didn't, to get you to this point.
It was a long trajectory. I mean, from a lot of people it is. I would say that, like, I originally started out in features, and the wonderful team at CNO produced my first feature. And I think working in that world, there has been a shift. I think a lot of the movie sort of community was starting to move into that cable arena, and getting representation as not just a feature writer, but a TV writer was the first step for me. And then coming in as a junior, which is sometimes you are the writer's assistant, sometimes you are a story editor, sometimes you are just, you know, being a junior, sort of learning from the seasoned writers in the room, from the showrunner, and if you're lucky, you might get to share a script or get to write a script or sort of position yourself for another season. So it was a lot of kind of climbing from there, from a junior writer to having enough shows under your belt to be kind of considered a senior writer. In that process, every room, every experience is different. Some people have great shepherds in their showrunners who kind of teach them the ropes, and some people, as we know, don't have a pleasant experience, and it is as that person wants to set the environment to be. And after a number of years, as a senior writer, and in the process of The Porter, there had been different folks who were at the helm. I know Arnold had sort of brought it originally to someone else, and it takes a long time to find its footing and its financing. So by the time it was ready for all of those things, both myself and Marcia, who had been in the early development rooms of The Porter, had the familiarity and the experience to say, okay, together, because this is a massive picture and a massive budget, we can sort of combine our strengths and run this room and run our series together. So what was wonderful is Marcia and I have different strengths. She is very sort of the organizer of many things, and very efficient at kind of, this is what production needs to be, and A, B, C, D, and E. For me, the story, the voice, the character, keeping the consistency of those things and making sure that translates on the floor is my strength. So together we were a great team and had a really great experience working together. So I think there is a lot of pay the dues steps, and in that process, my thing is always sort of be a decent human in the rooms, because sometimes people are wonderful and talented, but don't make the experience in the room or otherwise a positive one, and you want to work with people who are energetic, who have passion for the project, who do the work, who do it on time. Those are all great things, but yeah, it's a lot of steps, making relationships, keeping those relationships, and delivering, great work, and being a team player. So yeah, that's the long answer to how we got there.
I love that. It's a long answer because it took you many years. So it's, I'll start with this person and then that person. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to, thank you. Is it on? Yeah, it is on. I wanted to find out a little bit more about the research that went into informing the writing for this, since it's a period piece and you were trying to pick out the points that you wanted to focus on to make the story come to life. And did you have other writers also?
Yeah, yes, yes to all writers. It's so funny. That person who's just spoken is a good friend of mine, and actually she was part of the reason that I was interested in the series, because she was working on a documentary about comic strip artist named Maury Turner, and I was helping Angel on her documentary and was exposed to this sort of world because Maury's father had been a train porter, and it was the first time that I'd really thought about that world. But I remember in the course of working on that documentary that there was a story about his father being so overwhelmed at an event to hear people addressing his son by the name Mr. Turner, because often porters were addressed by a derogatory name called George. And so I was struck by, like, what is it to be so desperate just to get the basic respect of being called by your name, and the fight for that being a basis of the stories we wanted to tell. So thankfully, this man over here has, before we came aboard, he had been doing so much.
Obsessed.
Obsessed, and with the history. So he brought to our table years and years and years of books and articles and videos and interviews, and then we found somebody else who's obsessed with the history. So there was a lot for us to sort through, and there's some of it for other seasons, we hope. But yes, there's so many stories and so many characters.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like originally, like I said, when we were thinking about doing a movie, it was just we found so much research north and south of the border. I was fortunate to interview some of these porters that are no longer with us now, and also, there was one time Annmarie and I went to a book reading, and there was this old lady there, and we had mentioned that we were working on a show called The Porter, and she reached over to us where their old, it might make me cry, I'm sorry, reached over to us and said, please tell our story. We looked at each other and we were like, all right, we don't know how long it's gonna take, but you know, we gotta get this thing done. But it was, you know, the beautiful thing about it is that when you're going to learn about this research and this history, it puts a 2x4 in your back. And it makes you stand up proud because you're learning about yourself, you're learning about why you do certain things, why you're so resilient, why you're so strong, and why collectively, when we come together, what we can do north to south of the border. And that was the beauty of it, you know. It's not just Annmarie and the people you see here, but Charles Officer and R.T. Thorne, who are our directors, and so many other people who have taken on this vision and this passion and made it their own. And we had our tribe, and we called it, you know, Tribe Porter. So we're very, very proud of this, and we really, really hope that you guys watch the show if you haven't already, and see the fruit of our labor.
You can see why people were just drawn to Arnold. I mean, that kind of passion is just fantastic. Okay, I'm doing this lady, then I'm doing you because you were so patient. But I hear it's only 5 minutes. So if you ask questions quickly and you answer quickly, then I'll get that lady at the back.
I'll be fast. I'm actually a location manager, so I'm interested in if everything was filmed in Canada and whereabouts, or did you actually come down? My grandmother's house was across from a train track, and my father used to talk about waving at the Pullman porters when he was a kid. So I'm fascinated as to whether you actually crossed over or you stayed up in Canada, where you shot.
You want to take this one?
But I mean, the story crosses the borders fictionally, but you know, our histories between the Pullman porters and our Canadian porters are so similar. So yes, in terms of story, we do cross the border. In terms of the actual locations, we were in Winnipeg.
Winnipeg.
Which Aml loves. Aml loves Winnipeg. No, amazing people, amazing crew, very opened up our doors. There's some beautiful, we did have an old historic steam train that was available to us in Winnipeg, and just people who were excited for the opportunity to bring the world some beautiful buildings.
The architecture, architecture is from architects from the United States actually came to Winnipeg before they started building in Chicago, and they, I guess they sampled in the city some of the buildings that they were putting up, and then went to Chicago and built Chicago. So a lot of the buildings they look like American buildings, those old architecture.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a question on behalf of all the students here, because there's a couple of students here volunteering as well. And we mostly have a question about putting on multiple hats, like Arnold and Aml do, being able to go into your own project and direct, and then produce it, and then jump back into the hat of acting. We want to know, what do you think is your best tool in navigating that world?
What's my best tool in navigating?
Yes, navigating the world of jumping and putting on different hats of like directing and then producing and then jumping back into an actor role. Just something that you would say you should definitely make sure you watch out for this, because it can be difficult to transition.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to try and figure out the answer. I think with me, when it came to Boxing Day specifically, I think I traded, I used my acting career and how much leverage I had in my acting career to write a story that was so personal but also had commercial legs and had succinct vision to it that people went, okay, he can direct it. I also did a lot of short films prior. And actually, before I even got fully financed by Film 4 and BFI to do my film, I went to the London Christmas time, got my cousin, and actually just shot parts of the movie. So I was just really, really prepared to put myself in a position where it'd be difficult to say no, and jumping between the hats, like on set practically, is pretty crazy, because you're like, I'm on the monitor, and then I'm acting, and then I'm directing. I think great partnership. My writing partner is actually here, Bruce Purnell, and he and I write everything together, and we're very, you know, two sides of the same coin, different brains. And so having a great partnership and that great shorthand to me was really useful to me as a director. Producerially, that happened kind of by mistake because I was the only British producer on the film. We had the senior producers, but the only on the ground one. I had to learn on the job producing, like really intimately, contracts. What it really helped me with is deciding on, as a director, how to be more comprehensive with my vision, because I'm seeing, okay, you pull from here, you pull from there. So I think wearing all the hats, if you can stomach it, it does age you, but if you can stomach it, I definitely got gray hair for real. I got one gray hair now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
I got one
Just-
gray.
just the one.
You did 13 years, mate. But if you can stomach it, it really gives a respect for all the different positions. And I think for me, you know, I'm greenlit to do my next movie, and it's just about finding, even though I'm taking on a lot of those roles, I think the key thing is like sound partnership. And it doesn't have to be like people that are just like, oh, they're huge and all the rest of it. Like creative partnership and trust, I've found really is useful. And then jumping into this, you know, they really EP'd the show. You know, but creatively, I think just going through the experience, it just gave me the confidence to speak more with a bit more clarity about my version of how I feel like the show and characters could go. But they really, they are the staple of why the show was built. You know what I mean? Hope
Yeah.
that answers your question.
Yeah, I am just going to add one thing, though, because I work with a lot of emerging talent. Wear one hat first. Get somewhere with your one hat. Don't start with wearing more than one hat. It's just, I wanted to get to that last question. Okay, you can ask it, but we may not answer it. So you go ahead. But they're saying that I got to wrap up. But
I will be quick. I just want to know, what's one thing from this project that you feel like you can take into your next project?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's for everybody, whoever wants to answer.
Arnold? Jennifer?
A strong vision, a universal strong vision. I think if everyone is on board and they all have the same vision, that to me, I think that conquers all, or at least it gets it off on the right track. So for me, it's a universal vision.
Annmarie? What are you going to take from this into your next project?
Make it producible. like when, truly it's a large show. And I think sometimes what saves you on the ground is what you do on the page. So, you have time and budget and limits for certain amount of things. What you do on the page is going to save you on the ground, so.
And Jennifer's probably already in her next project. No?
No, I mean, I guess one of the things I learned is because this is so much an American story and a Canadian story, and I think because the Canadians actually started the union movement a little bit earlier than the Americans, yeah, like we're starting with the Canadians and then progressing into that integrated movement more. And I think maybe, I don't know, it's a storytelling question, but maybe we would have asked ourselves, should we thread that in sooner, even though historically that wasn't the order of things. But obviously, if we keep going, we can thread it in, but that's something that I've asked myself. And then with regards to that location question, it's an interesting question because part of why we went to Winnipeg, to circle back to the beginning, was because of the high level of tax credits there, which helped us with our financing, but also because, like Arnold said, of the Chicago-style architecture. But so much of our show was also built with visual effects, which is happening more and more today because it's, with the pandemic, it was very hard. Probably if the pandemic didn't happen, we would have maybe gone to Chicago and done second unit, got some footage, come back and worked it in. So the pandemic also shaped how we shot. So sort of thinking and going forward, how does one do all these locations without the pandemic is, I guess, the next
The
thing.
new thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, do you want to say something?
Nah, don't worry about it. I know. I think for me, I feel like the porter, and I'm doing it in my work already. Build a moment. Entertainment's in a very tricky place right now, and I think the more genuine we are, and the more like clear we are on our vision, you can build a moment, and people, I think, will eventually come. So that's what I got from this.
Thank you. No, that was amazing. You guys were fantastic. You were all fantastic. Thank you for coming. Catherine, Devin, thank you. Great job. Great job. And watch The Porter, BET, unless you're in Canada.